welcome to ACS 4390. This is going to be a class on GraphQL. Right now I'm looking at the slides, but the slides are actually in our GitHub repo, and actually they're just the README pages, but just in slide form. Okay, so everything here in our Tech@DU ACS 4390 Query Languages class is all the material that we will be seeing in the slides. I'm going to look at the syllabus page here. So this is the first page right here. And if I scroll down, you can see we're on Tuesday, January 18, and this is lesson number 1. Okay. So we're going to talk about GraphQL, and this will be an introduction to the GraphQL language. So you can click on this link right here, and everything that I have in the slides is it's exactly the same text that you see here in this README, but just in slide format. So you can read this here, and I'm going to go over the slides right when I do the video. So let's talk about GraphQL. So first of all, why should you know this, right? Well, GraphQL represents a new way to work with network transactions, right? And it's got many benefits over REST. So you've probably used REST in the past, but GraphQL maybe will give you a new look on how the internet works. It could be the future. It has a lot of benefits over REST, right? So our learning objectives for today are, 1, to compare REST with GraphQL. So if you can compare the two, you can make good decisions about how you use them, right? We're going to define what are RESTful routes. So we'll review that. You probably already know and have done that in some other classes, but we'll cover them here. We're also going to describe the benefits of GraphQL. So what does GraphQL do for us, right? What is it offering? So, that maybe we'll say why you might want to use this for a project, right? And then we'll compare and contrast REST and GraphQL. I guess I actually have this as point number 1 too, but we'll just ignore that. So the other thing we're going to do is we're also going to write some GraphQL queries, okay? So we're going to write some GraphQL queries today, and that'll be fun. We'll play with the GraphQL language. And GraphQL is a little more than just the language, as we'll learn. Okay? So in class, we'll do this exercise here where everybody will explain how the internet works as if I'm 5 years old, right? So we'll skip that slide for now. What makes the web work, right? Well, there's 2 approaches that are commonly used right now, okay? There's REST and there's SOAP. Okay, so you've probably heard of REST, everybody uses REST. Nobody uses SOAP, but we'll look at SOAP first. Okay, so what is SOAP? SOAP stands for Simple Object Access Protocol. This is the official standard maintained by the W3C. So the W3C is the World Wide Web Consortium. And they are, actually I have their Wikipedia page open right here. They are the standards body. So they decide how the internet works, just like people decide how, what an electrical socket looks like and how you can connect with it, right? This is they're deciding how we can connect with the internet. And they say that SOAP is the official protocol. It's the official standard, right? But nobody uses it, right? But that's what SOAP is, right? It's the official standard, right? So what is SOAP? How does SOAP work? Well, SOAP uses XML, right? So XML is a format. It's similar to JSON. It's a little more verbose. This is a little sample of some XML right here. Imagine you had a website that was like a library website or a bookstore or something like that, and you wanted to pass some data around that represented a book object, right? Okay, so you might write it in this form, right? So it looks a lot like HTML, huh? So the W3C, who maintains the web and defines what the HTML language does and how web pages work with it, they also want us to pass information around the XML format that looks like HTML, right? That's the official standard, right? So this is how you would pass information around using SOAP. SOAP uses this exclusively, okay? It doesn't work with JSON. Let's talk about REST for a moment. So REST is not really a language or a protocol or anything like that. It's just a architectural principle and guideline on how to create public APIs. Okay, so REST uses some of the stuff from the W3C, right? It uses their HTTP protocols, but it says like how you should use them, right? And if you use them in a RESTful way, then you're performing RESTful routes, okay? So it's more of a style or architecture rather than a hard language and set of rules, okay? So how does REST work? Well, REST uses RESTful routes, and it's basically the RESTful routes allow us to do CRUD applications, right? So, you know, CRUD, let's talk about CRUD for a second. So CRUD is create, read, update, and delete, right? So that's usually the operations that we're doing on the web. Like we're creating a new document, like I'm creating a user account on a system. I'm reading data from the database, like I'm saying, I'm doing a search or something, right? I'm updating, I'm gonna change or add a new post or edit an existing post, right? And delete, I'm gonna remove something from the system, right? Okay. Usually RESTful routes look like this. They have a URL, right? So we name a URL and then we use an HTTP method, right? Like one of the protocols, post, get, put, delete, right? Okay, so we use one of these to do an operation. So we might have a route called posts, and that would be a post. You know, we could do, or we could say posts.get, and we could get the posts. We could say post number 10, and we could say we're going to put, and that's an update. So we're going to change something on post number 10, right? And then we could say delete post number 23, okay? So we have a route for each of these you know, operations that we want to do. That's like a key feature of REST, okay? So here's a real API, and this is the Swappy API. It's the Star Wars API. It gives us information about Star Wars characters, the films, the species, the vehicles, and the starships, right? So let's try this out for a moment using REST. Okay, so this is a REST API. I'm going to open this in a new window here, and you can see this is what the API looks like. If I say, it's hard to read here, but you can see if I'd say, you know, https swappy.dev/API/people, if I put the person number on the end, like person number 1, then it will load up and give me Luke Skywalker. Okay. If I say, you know, person number 2, it'll give me C3PO. Okay. And then it returns all of this information, and it returns the information in JSON format. So they did not return this in XML format. Okay. So try that out for a minute and just experiment. You get the films. Get it. Let's try that one. I'll go up here and I'll say, what is film number 1, right? Loading up the films, and then I'll put like film number 1 on the end right here, and you can see this is A New Hope is film number 1, right? Okay. Oops. Let me go back to my slides, right? So experiment with that and try it out and see how it works, right? So let's talk about the difference now between REST and GraphQL, okay? So unlike REST, GraphQL uses a single endpoint. So in the video here, you saw that if I wanted to get people, I have an endpoint for that. If I want to get vehicles, I have a different endpoint for vehicles, okay? With GraphQL, we'll have a single endpoint, okay? So GraphQL, or REST, multiple endpoints, GraphQL, one endpoint, okay? So let's try this out with the REST server for a moment, right? Why don't you experiment, and here's what I want you to do. Here's some of the characters that you can get. You can get Luke, you can get R2-D2, you can get Darth Vader. So Darth Vader is person number 4, right? Leia Organa is person number 5. Try and find C-3PO, Han Solo, Chewbacca, and Boba Fett. Okay, so basically you're just going to change the number here on the end of the API, right? So just change the value here, and you should be able to find the different characters. Oops. Let me actually, I'll go find C-3PO, because C-3PO is character number 2, I remember. So I'll open this up and get character number 2, C-3PO, right? And then you can just work your way through the characters. You know, I know it's a little tedious, but you know, it's just for fun anyway, right? So let's go. Number 5 is Leia. Who is character number 6 is Owen Lars. Okay. So anyway, so try and find these characters: Han Solo, Chewbacca, and Boba Fett. Okay. You can stop the video here and then continue. Okay, so how did you do? Let's try that again, but let's try planets. So notice this time the planets has the same, it's the URL begins in the same way up to here, but after that we change the word here for planets instead of people, so we have a different route. Okay, so this is a part of the REST system, right? We have a route that describes each of the objects. So the planet right here, or planets or people, that's the name of the resource that we want to get in a RESTful route. Okay, it's part of the URL. Okay, so let's try that same experiment again, but what I want you to do is stop the video and try and find these planets. Try and find Aldebaran, Bespin, and Endor. Okay, so you'll use this URL here, and then you'll just change the number on the end, right? Same thing that we did in the last example. So here is Dagobah, right? Let's see what planet number 6 is, Bespin, right? So you try that out on your own and then start the video again. Okay, great. How did you do? Hopefully that was a fun exercise. Let's try it with the GraphQL now. So in those last 2 examples, you should have been getting a pretty good idea of how REST works. So those were all RESTful. Let's do the same things, but with GraphQL, okay? And you will see how it's different, okay? Now, in order to do this with GraphQL, we have to understand how the GraphQL language works. So with REST, we just call the URL, and the URL is basically the language that gets us to the resources that we want, right? The URL is the language. In GraphQL, we have a single endpoint, but we pass the endpoint a little piece of data written in the GraphQL language, which might look something like this or this, and then it uses this to figure out what we want, okay? So let's talk about this. A GraphQL query always begins with the curly braces, okay? So it starts with a curly brace, ends with a curly brace, okay? Inside the curly brace, you name the type of the thing that you want. So this is the resource type that I'm looking for. I'm looking for a person resource, okay? You'll notice over here I said posts and I said users. So in this case, I would be looking for a post resource or a user's resource, okay? In this case, notice there's no parentheses after these two. So if you have a type that doesn't have any parameters, you don't put anything after it. You can just put the type, okay? But in this case, I have a person type, and my person type has a parameter because I want to say which person I want. So we saw in the REST API, you always had to have the number. So this is the same thing. So this should be like person would be Leia Organa because she was ID number 5. Okay, so when there's a parameter, we put the parentheses on the end, and then we put the parameter and the value inside the parentheses. So it's always name of the parameter, colon, and the value, okay? Next, we say what fields we want from that type. Okay, so this person type has a bunch of fields, including a name and an eye color field, and maybe some more fields, right? Like homeworld or hair color or whatever, right? Species, right? Okay, and then we say which fields we want, and only those fields are returned, right? So if we only want the name, we could just put name here and leave all of these off, and GraphQL would only return person number 5 and only their name, okay? If we wanted the name and eye color, we'd do it like this, right? We do both of these. And then if we wanted the homeworld, we could put homeworld here too. Pardon me. Okay, so let's give that a try now with the GraphQL server, right? So here's a link to the Swappy API, but the GraphQL server for Swappy API. So I'm going to open this up in a window here, and GraphQL usually, any GraphQL server will usually give you this graphical tool, and the graphical browser is kind of like a web page that lets you, test out the database, okay? And the way it works is this way. It gives you a little run button here, and if you click on that, it'll run a query. And I have a query at the bottom here. Yours, when you open this up, it might not have this query for you, right? Because I've already run this, but you can type the query in yourself, right? And then all of these things here that begin with the hashtag are comments, right? So they kind of tell you here of some of the operations that you can do. So I'm actually just going to delete that to make this a little cleaner, right? And you can see here I've got the query. It begins with the curly brackets. It's got person and then the parentheses, and I'm telling it I want parameter person ID colon, and I want person number 5, and then I want the name and the eye color. Okay. And then when I run the query by clicking the run button here, it gives me this JSON data in response. Okay, so it's always in the form of data colon and then an object, and then it gives us the type, person, name, or the name of the field inside that type, right? So it gives me name and eye color here. Okay. So this is really great. Like we could let's get Luke Skywalker. So that's person number 1. Luke Skywalker. If I wanted person number 3, it would give me R2-D2. Let's do person number 11 is Anakin Skywalker. Who's number? I think 20 is Boba Fett. No, that's Yoda. I forget who these are. 18 is wait. You know, there's one of these is missing. I think if you do 17, so 17 says not in the database. So if you get an error, it might look like this, right? If you make a mistake with the syntax, it'll usually catch it here in graphical, right? So when I do this, it's going to give me an error, right? Because I need to have a colon, right? So why don't you stop for a minute, stop the video, and what I want you to do is follow the slides here, the notes in the in our repo for the class, right? Okay, and then I want you to try and find Luke Skywalker, R2-D2, C-3PO, and Darth Vader using the GraphQL query. Okay, so try that in the GraphQL graphical browser here. Okay, so you can stop the video. And I'll give you a clue here, Darth Vader's number 4, okay? And then continue the video when you're done. Okay, great. So how did that go? I think we're starting to compare the two. Let's talk about REST versus GraphQL. What is GraphQL doing for us here? Well, one of the things that's happening is GraphQL is preventing overfetching. So oftentimes with a REST query, we are getting all the data at the endpoint for that resource, right? And we're getting more data than we need, right? Okay. GraphQL, we're saying what data we want, and we're only getting the data that we ask for. Right? So for example, when we use the REST API, it returns the following, right? So if I got just Luke Skywalker, it would give me his height, his mass, his hair colors, skin colors, eye color, birth year, gender, homeworld, films, species, vehicles, starships, created, edited, URL, right? But maybe I only wanted the name, right? And the eye color, right? So in that case, like I would have gotten a lot more information than I needed, okay? So with GraphQL, though, I would just get this. So I could just get the name, okay? So overfetching is when we get more than we need, okay? So why is that a good thing? I mean, maybe it's not that much data, right? But actually, if people are surfing the web on their phones and they're using a data connection, they're not on Wi-Fi, you know, maybe overfetching saves bandwidth. Maybe if you're running a server and your server is serving like thousands or millions of people at the same time all day long, maybe this could really add up, right? So if you were just serving this every request instead of this, maybe that saves your server bandwidth, right? Okay, so so this is just saying, yeah, we save some bandwidth, right? So I just said that, right? So with GraphQL, we're always just describing the fields that we want, okay? So let's compare GraphQL and REST again. So with GraphQL, we describe what we want, and the server returns only data that matches the query. With REST, we often get more than we need. That's called overfetching, okay? Let's talk about underfetching. This is also something that happened with our request, okay? And we'll describe what underfetching is now, right? So let's imagine we want to get Leia's homeworld, right? So I'm going to go and open this up in a window here, and here is Leia Organa, and you'll notice that I get the name, the height, the mass, the hair color, the eye color, all this stuff. So I overfetched, right? I didn't want the, oops, I clicked on the films. I didn't want the films, I didn't want the species, I didn't want the vehicles, but I do want the homeworld, right? And notice with this request, I got the homeworld, but I got a REST, route. You know what I mean? I basically REST is saying like this resource of homeworld number 2 exists at this URL, right? And I just got the URL. So that means that my system, if I was going to display Leia's name in homeworld, I need to also look up the homeworld, right? So I have to go here to this URL and get the homeworld Aldebaran, right? Where again, I overfetched it. So really I just want the name here and the name here, right? So underfetching is when we request not enough data. We make a request and we don't get everything, and then we have to make a second request, right? So GraphQL is going to prevent this also, okay? So before we look at GraphQL, why don't we try some underfetching with REST? So what I want you to do is use the Swappy API and find Chewbacca's homeworld, R2-D2's homeworld, and Han Solo's homeworld. So essentially, this is the URL to Leia's people page, right? So load that up, change the number here to find Chewbacca, R2-D2, and Han Solo, and then find the homeworld. I'll walk through this really quick. Let's try it, right? Or you can stop the video at any time and then try it on your own. So remember, R2-D2 is person number 3. So I'm going to type in person number 3 and I get R2-D2. But now to get the homeworld, I have to look up planet number 8, right? So I go to homeworld, I click planet number 8, and now I've got Naboo, right, is R2's homeworld, okay? So what I need you to do is find Chewbacca's homeworld and Han Solo's homeworld, okay? So stop the video, give that a try, and then start again. Okay, how did that go? So hopefully that wasn't too difficult. Hopefully by doing it yourself, you're seeing what overfetching and underfetching is doing. So remember, in both cases there, we were doing both. We were overfetching, getting more than we needed, and underfetching, getting not enough with the first request, okay? So each time you had to do this, you had to get the person, and then you had to get the RESTful route to their homeworld, and then you had to load that because you underfetched, and then you loaded more data than you needed each time, okay? Let's try that with GraphQL now, okay? So GraphQL, if we have a type and one of the fields is another type with fields of its own, we can write the request like this. Notice that homeworld is a type, it's a resource type, so we can put the curly brackets after it, and then we can put any of the fields on homeworld underneath that, and we'll get those values, okay? So let's give that a try. Why don't you find R2-D2's name homeworld, Leia's name and homeworld, Han Solo's name and height and homeworld, and then get the diameter of R2's homeworld. Okay, so I'm going to open this up. I'll do the first one, and then you can give it a try on your own, right? So here is my request here. R2 was person number 2. I like that eye color is yellow, right? I feel like R2's got one eye and it's red, but I'm not a Star Wars expert, right? So I didn't want that though. I wanted the name, and then I also wanted the homeworld. Notice that graphical, as you type the field names, it'll start code hinting you for them, right? So use this to your advantage, right? So I'm going to type homeworld, and then it's saying like, hey, you can't just get the homeworld, right? It says homeworld is a must have a selection of subfields, right? Did you mean homeworld curly brackets? Notice the message there is trying to code hint me. So yeah, I did mean this, right? And then I can type in here, and I can start typing, N for name, rotational period. Let's do name. Maybe I'll do diameter also just for fun, right? So here I'm going to get person number 2. I'm going to get their name. I'm going to get their homeworld, and then I'm going to get the name and the diameter of their homeworld. Okay, so let's try it out. Oh, Tatooine is the homeworld for C-3PO. Oh yeah, I wanted R2 as person number 3. Let's do that, right? Oh, maybe I got the wrong one. Maybe iColor for R2 is red. Yeah, that, see, I know my Star Wars, right? Yeah, and I got planet name is Naboo, and diameter is, I don't know what that is. Maybe that's like kilometers, right? But anyway, you give that a try now. Okay, so find Leia's homeworld, Han's name, height, and homeworld, and then get the diameter of R2's homeworld. So I actually kind of did that for you, but you go and do it on your own. Okay, stop the video and then we can continue again in a minute. Okay, how did that go? Hopefully that wasn't too difficult, you know. Hopefully graphical maybe led you through to the correct names for the fields and spotted any errors that you might have run into. Let's move on. So let's compare REST with GraphQL. So again, GraphQL often overfetches and underfetches, or REST often overfetches and underfetches. GraphQL only fetches what we ask for with a single query from a single endpoint, I'll add, right? Okay. So in class, we'll do this exercise where I'll just have all the students, all of you, discuss this. You can discuss this with your friends and neighbors if you're not in the actual class. So discuss like what is GraphQL and REST and compare the two. You can maybe get into what are the pros and cons of each, right? So maybe REST has some pros that GraphQL doesn't have, and maybe the same is true for GraphQL, right? So here maybe are some answers to those, right? So REST requires multiple endpoints to make a complex API. Might be harder for you to change your API, right? It often overfetches, providing you more data than you need, which eats up bandwidth. Often underfetches, which makes queries more complex, right? And maybe requires more bandwidth. GraphQL uses a single endpoint. It's easier to manage. It's more tolerant to changes. It fetches only what you ask for, prevents over and under fetching, and queries return what you ask for, which maybe saves bandwidth. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more, right? So GraphQL also has some other benefits. So it's got type safety, right? And it's got introspection. So type safety means that if we ask for a particular type and the server returns the wrong type. So for example, if we ask for the diameter and the server is trying to return a string, GraphQL will spot that and throw an error. Okay? If we provide a parameter like person ID, but we typed in the name of the person as a string instead of the number, which the ID expects, then GraphQL will spot that and throw an error and tell us, right? So that's type safety, okay? Introspection allows GraphQL to look at the data types and see what they are. And in a lot of ways, you saw that in the graphical browser as it code hinted you. So as you type the name H and it said, oh, it offers homeworld and height and some other properties that match the H, right? When it does that, it's basically using introspection because it sees what fields are available, right? Okay, and it sees what types are available and what fields are available on what type so that it can look at itself to see what's there, okay? We'll get more into that later. So let's go over the core features of GraphQL. So GraphQL is a language and a schema definition language. So it's a query language, which is what we use just now, but on the server, there's also a schema language that we can use. Okay, so the query language supports these three different types of queries. It has a regular query, which is like a request. We ask for information, it returns it. It's got a mutation query, which is a query that goes to the server and makes a change. And it's got a subscription query, which is kind of like a real-time transaction. So we send a subscription and then we're subscribed to changes. So if a change occurs, it pushes data to us. So you can use that for a chat room, for example, okay? The schema definition language is what we use on the back end to define like how the back end stores and arranges the data. So the schema definition language supports strong typing and introspection. Okay, so what is GraphQL again? It's a little more than just the query language, right? Okay, so GraphQL describes themselves in this way. They say, we're an open source data query and manipulation language for APIs and a runtime for fulfilling queries with existing data. So that means that basically we have to have both. We can't just set up GraphQL on the front end and then use whatever on the back end. We have to use a GraphQL compatible back end in order to support the query language from the front end. Okay? GraphQL isn't a specific set of software though, so you can implement GraphQL with any backend, right? And there's some popular libraries that are already built or popular frameworks, like there's a GraphQL Express and some other ones, and Apollo is another popular one, okay? So let's dig into the language and do a little more advanced query with the language. So there's a concept called aliases, right? So aliases, you'll need to use this for the homework assignment, okay? So this is kind of an advanced query. We saw some simple queries earlier, but now we're going to add a few more features, okay? So the data that's returned is in the same format as the data that we ask for. So in other words, let me put it this way. When we create a query, we're basically describing what we want and the structure of what is going to be returned. Okay, so that means that if we ask for something, sometimes there can be a clash in names. Okay, so for example, consider the scenario here. I've started my GraphQL query with the curly braces, and then I said that I want a person type, and I want person number 2, C3PO, and person number 3, R2D2. Okay, so both of these are person types, but this one's not going to work, and I'll show you why. If I look at the results, you'll see that I'll get my JSON object, and it'll say data. It always says data at the top, and then it'll give me a type of person right here, and then it'll give me another field that has a duplicate, right? So this doesn't work. The names here have to be unique at the same level, right? So person, is the type we're looking for, and GraphQL is going to make the data match what we've written here, right? So it's going to say person here and here, and we can't have two of these in the same level, right? So this isn't going to work, right? So to fix that, we'll use an alias. So an alias looks like this. We say person A, or you can actually put any name you like here. Okay, so anything can go here. So you could say R2, or you could say, A, or you could say, person 1 or whatever, right? I just did person A and person B. So I'll say person A, colon, and then I say the person type, and then I just continue my query as usual. Okay, and then I can say person B, and then I say person, and I continue my query as usual. Okay, so when I do this, this is going to be the name that's used in place of this name. So the results will look like this. It'll say person A is name C3PO, and person B has field name of R2D2. Okay? So after class, let's talk about the homework now. Okay? So I want you to do two things. I want you to watch the videos over here at this website called How to GraphQL, and they'll basically go over all the things that I did, but kind of in a little more detail, right? And there's a bunch of videos there, but I just want you to watch the first 4 of these videos. Okay, introduction, GraphQL is better than REST, core concepts, and the big picture architecture. Okay. Second assignment is go to Gradescope and answer all the questions in assignment number 1 on Gradescope, okay? So for each of these things, you're going to provide the GraphQL query that would provide what is asked for. So let me I'll go to my Gradescope right here. You'll go to, I'm going to log into my account there, go to ACS 4390, I'll go to assignment number 1, and I'm editing the outline here, but wait, where is my assignment? Sorry, I'm missing, did I get the wrong assignment? Maybe that's the wrong one. I gotta get assignment number 1, how to GraphQL. Okay, yeah, so what you're gonna do here is it'll look like this for you, and you'll put the query in here. So if you say, find Boba Fett, it's going to be, person parameter or person ID colon person number, I forget, Boba Fett, I think it's number 20, right? Okay, so go through here, find Boba Fett, put the query into the field, right? Find Yoda, put the query in the field, but this time get the name, the height, and the eye color. Okay, here get Obi-Wan Kenobi, include the name and the name of Obi's homeworld, right? Okay, count all the species. Okay, so this is a little trickier. You'll have to use some of the GraphQL queries, use the introspection to go find those, right? Actually, let me go and get one of those right now, and I'll do that for you just to show you how to do that, right? Here is a good tip. I'm going to go get the, oh yeah, here it is right here, Swappy GraphQL. So I'll open this in a window, and if you click on the Docs button here, it'll show you all of the queries that are possible. So if I click on root, you can see I can get all films, all people, right? I can get all planets, all species, all vehicles. Let's get all people, right? And here I can get after first, right? I can get the people connection. It kind of tells you what each of the things do. Let me actually go back. Let me get a better one. I'm going to get person, right? And if I click on person, you can see if I supply the ID or it wants an ID, it's going to give me person, right, for that ID. And if I see person type right here, I can click on the type and it'll tell me what is available. So I can get name, birth year, eye color, gender, etc., right? Okay. Let's go back and look at another one just for fun. So use this and you can search it, right? Okay. And then you can also use the code hints over here to help you because it'll use all the data from here. Okay. So if you read this, you have it open and you try it out with the code hints, you can usually find things without too much trouble. Wait, let's go to root there. Let's go to all people. I'm going to click on the people connection type and then it'll tell me what's available. Right? Total count will tell you how many people there are. Okay? So total count the total number of objects in this connection, right? Okay? So that'll tell you how many are there. Let me go back here to our homework. So you're going to go through and answer the questions in the grade scope, okay? So I think there's like 10 questions in here, okay? So go through each one of these, and some of them require an alias, okay? So you'll have to use the alias. So for example, get both R2-D2 and C3PO, we're gonna get both the name and the eye color for both characters at the same time. So this would require an alias, okay? So anyway, so I'll leave that up to you, and I hope that's a fun assignment for you just to get started with GraphQL. And here again, we're just focusing on the GraphQL language, and later we'll build a GraphQL server too. So thanks for watching. I hope that this was interesting, and post your questions to the comments, and I'll see you in class.